Well, I'm pleased to introduce to you all today Dr. Wesley Hogan, Assistant Professor of History at Virginia State University in Petersburg. In Many Minds, One Heart, Dr. Hogan writes that, quote, "In 1963, it seemed like the SDS was a debating club. SNCC lived the revolution." In a review in the Journal of American History, Cheryl Greenberg calls Many Minds, One Heart, quote, "one of the best of the new histories of the civil rights movement." And Randy Finley's review recommends it, quote, "to anyone dreaming of a better America." And the Lillian Smith Book Awards judges kind of liked it too. And I give you Dr. Hogan. Thank you very much.
It would be really hard to exaggerate today how strange it is that most Americans know about Bull Connor fighting the movement in Birmingham with dogs and hoses, and know about Dr. King's magnificent "I Have a Dream" speech, and yet they don't know about SNCC. So Dr. King called SNCC the stormtroopers of the movement, who could and did go where others feared to go, blazing a new trail for others to follow. It seems very strange and dangerous to me that Americans don't know about SNCC. In the 20th century, no one learned more about how to create and sustain a more perfect union than SNCC workers. And they learned through experiences that sometimes shocked and horrified and electrified the nation and got on the front page of the New York Times, but most of the time through rather mundane experiences like canvassing, how to make America live out its promise of one man and one vote. They worked amidst a white supremacist resistance that was brutal and terrifying and at times seemingly all-encompassing. Still, as a culture, we know practically nothing about SNCC's hard-won knowledge, and I want to make it clear as I can in this short amount of time, exactly what they achieved. And so, as I mentioned, some of what they did was mundane, knocking on doors, registering people to vote. Many people turned them away for not enough time to register, too much fear that they would lose a job. But SNCC people were young, most were under 21, and they were determined. And they kept on, sometimes despite unthinkable hurdles. And just to give one example of literally thousands of examples, Ivanhoe Donaldson and Charlie Cobb were canvassing the tiny delta town of Rolling Forks, Mississippi. This is the hometown of blues genius Muddy Waters. In 1963. Donaldson was a black football player raised in Queens, attending Michigan State. And he approached a woman sitting on her porch. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said. "Have you registered to vote yet?" No, she had not. As he began to describe the gubernatorial campaign of African-American Aaron Henry, a white man drove onto the grass and into the center of the yard. He jumped out and began yelling a stream of foul-mouthed invective. He told Donaldson that African Americans around here didn't need to vote. So you and your damn buddy, get out of here. He gave him a minute to leave, and suddenly the police arrived, threw Donaldson in the back of a police cruiser, and one officer pulled out a gun, sat next to Donaldson in the back, undid the safety, and held the weapon to Donaldson's temple. And remember, this is a 20-year-old from Michigan State. He's been in Mississippi 3 months. And the police officer said, "You and the other goddamn Moses Blacks around here ain't gonna get nothing but a bullet in the head." Another officer intervened and Donaldson was released. The most amazing thing to me about Donaldson is that he stayed. He stayed in Mississippi, not for another day, or another week, or another month, or even a year. But Donaldson stayed and kept canvassing and working in Mississippi until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 forced armed federal marshals to take his place, assuring black Mississippians the right to vote. So in my opinion, it is hard to exaggerate the achievements of men and women such as Donaldson. But SNCC didn't learn just about white supremacy and how to fight it, which is extraordinary enough on its own, or how to stay despite fear. Incredible as these achievements were on their own, SNCC also learned more than most of us today know about how to sustain democracy within a group, as Toby mentioned. When racial tensions within SNCC began to boil over by 1964, some thought this would paralyze the group, force it to splinter, force it to suspend its work. And instead, Charles Sherrod, who I'm proud to say was a SNCC organizer originally from Petersburg, Virginia, spoke a truth that we still have a hard time hearing in broader America. Quote, "Some of us can't admit that we have hatred and hostility toward another race," he stated. Blacks and whites had to work together. But to do so effectively, they had to admit we got hatred in us. Even after a dozen years working in the movement, Sherrod admitted that he himself felt hatred towards whites, and yet he demanded that SNCC develop a mechanism for overcoming their own internal race hatred, for being able to transcend what he called our feeling for self. So this acknowledgement was the only way to proceed toward the beloved community. It was the only way to stay and work together. Sherrod, a pioneer in interracial organizing, is still largely unknown outside his adopted hometown of Albany, Georgia. So SNCC did both. They took dramatic action like the sit-ins and the Freedom Rides, and they committed to the long haul, this invisible work that Barack Obama has been so lambasted for, right? Community organizing. For a time in the 1960s, they developed a method of helping others to become fully active citizens, and we still need that model today. They were very patient, and I'm not talking about the kind of patience called for by Southern whites, nor was it some kind of radical patience. It surely did not call people to be patient relative to the external pace of change. Instead, this kind of patience was an understanding that many SNCC people possessed. They were willing to kind of sift through their own experiences and feelings. They were patient with each other. They were patient with each other's errors, patient with the predecessors in the older generation, and patient with larger African American constituencies across America. And this persistent but calm behavior exhibited by SNCC in the 5 or 6 years they were most active allowed them to combine the ingredients necessary to act when most of us did not act, and to do so with sustained poise. This form of patience they developed and taught to other SNCC people allowed them, raised as the rest of us and they themselves were in a hierarchical and segregated society, to undergo a process, right? One that prepared them to act as full citizens for the first time. It was a kind of democratic patience. So exactly what was SNCC able to do? Though largely invisible to us today, in the early 1960s, SNCC inspired hundreds and then thousands of ordinary Americans to the greatest attempt to create a real democracy since the American Revolution. Police beat them and shot them, put guns to their head, and in some cases pulled the trigger. Yet far more stayed than died. They became prophets of a new civic religion, always, always walking the roads and listening. They cleared new spaces through their slow and patient work. They cleared the beginnings of a new democratic terrain. And I would argue that the space that they carved out for the rest of us is still there, and still open, and still waiting. So again, I want to thank the committee for recognizing the crucial nature of SNCC's democratic achievement. I think more is coming in our time. As former SNCC chair and now Georgia Congressman John Lewis said last Thursday night in Denver, quote, "Democracy is not a state, it's not a status, it's an act, one that we continually need to renew." He continued on to say that the civil rights movement is a testament to the determination and courage of the people who just were forced and determined and bound to make a difference in America. Today, I would argue that the yearning for a more genuinely free and just America is again becoming overwhelming. So as a sign of this hunger in our culture and wisdom of sectors in our society, I want to accept this award on behalf of the young people of SNCC who did this. I'm honored that some of them are here today, and I'd like to ask them to stand and come forward and be celebrated for their path-breaking achievements.
should have given this to all three of you.
Yeah. I'll accept it on behalf, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.